Marcus Reed was not your typical billionaire. Unlike the flashy tycoons who flaunted their wealth with private yachts, luxury cars, and designer suits, Marcus preferred a quieter life. He valued simplicity over extravagance, often blending into crowds without drawing attention to himself. His success story was one of grit and determination, a journey from humble beginnings in a small town to becoming one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. Yet, despite his fortune, Marcus never let money define him. He remained grounded, always remembering where he came from. On this particular day, Marcus found himself traveling to a picturesque coastal town for a business meeting. The town was known for its charming streets lined with quaint cafes, art galleries, and boutique shops. It was also home to the Grand Vista, an upscale hotel that boasted breathtaking views of the ocean and impeccable service, or so the brochures claimed. Marcus had booked a room there because it was conveniently located near the venue for his meeting. Little did he know, this trip would leave an indelible mark on his life. When Marcus arrived at the Grand Vista, he stepped out of a modest rental car rather than a chauffeured limousine. Dressed in a pair of faded jeans, a plain sweater, and sneakers, he looked more like a tourist than someone worth billions. His appearance was deliberate. Marcus didn't want people treating him differently just because they knew how much money he had. As he entered the grand lobby of the hotel, he couldn't help but admire the elegant decor. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Plush velvet chairs were arranged around marble tables, and soft piano music played in the background. It was exactly the kind of place he imagined when booking his stay. At the reception desk, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile greeted him. She glanced up briefly before returning her attention to the computer screen in front of her. "Good afternoon," Marcus said politely, placing his ID and credit card on the counter. "I have a reservation under the name Marcus Reed." The receptionist paused, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Without looking directly at him, she replied, "Let me check." After a few moments of tapping keys, she frowned slightly, and then shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, but we don't seem to have any available rooms right now." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's strange. I made the reservation weeks ago through your website. Are you sure?" She hesitated, glancing nervously toward another employee standing nearby. Finally, she forced another smile and said, "Yes, I double-checked. We're completely booked for tonight. Perhaps you could try another hotel?" Her tone was polite enough, but something about her demeanor felt off. Marcus noticed the way she avoided making eye contact, her body language stiff and uncomfortable. Determined to get to the bottom of things, he leaned closer and asked calmly, "Are you certain? Because I see several empty chairs in the lounge area, and the parking lot outside isn't full. Surely there must be some availability." The receptionist's cheeks flushed red, and she shifted uneasily in her seat. Before she could respond, a man wearing a suit approached the desk. He appeared to be a manager or supervisor, judging by the way the receptionist straightened up upon seeing him. With a tight smile, the man interjected, "Is there a problem here?" "No, no problem," Marcus assured him, though his voice carried a hint of skepticism. "I simply can't understand why my confirmed reservation seems to have disappeared. Can you explain what's going on?" The manager studied Marcus for a moment, taking in his casual attire and unassuming presence. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he said, "Sir, as my colleague mentioned, we are fully booked. There's nothing more we can do. I suggest you look elsewhere." It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Marcus caught it, the slight curl of the manager's lip, the condescending tone in his voice. And then there was the whispered comment from the receptionist, barely audible but unmistakable. "Not the kind of guest we want here anyway." Though they thought he hadn't heard, Marcus understood perfectly well what they meant. They weren't rejecting him because of a lack of rooms. They were rejecting him because of the color of his skin. For a moment, anger surged within him. He wanted to call them out, to demand answers and expose their prejudice. But Marcus was no stranger to discrimination. Over the years, he'd faced countless instances of bias, both overt and covert. He knew that reacting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. It would only escalate the situation. Instead, he took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. With a nod, he said evenly, "Thank you for your time," and turned to leave. As he walked back to his car, Marcus replayed the scene in his mind. He thought about all the hard work it had taken to build his empire, all the obstacles he'd overcome to achieve success. And yet here he was, still being judged not by his accomplishments but by superficial appearances. It wasn't fair, but fairness wasn't something Marcus expected from the world. What he did expect, however, was accountability. Sitting behind the wheel of his rental car, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. Typing quickly, he jotted down ideas for what he intended to do next. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message. The Grand Vista had underestimated him, assuming he was just another ordinary traveler. What they didn't realize was that they had crossed paths with someone extraordinary, someone who had the means, the influence, and the resolve to make them regret their decision. By the time Marcus drove away from the hotel, his mind was already racing with plans. He smiled faintly to himself, knowing that this wasn't the end of his story with the Grand Vista. It was only the beginning. Back at his private jet, Marcus Reed sat in quiet contemplation. The sleek interior of the aircraft offered a stark contrast to the cold reception he'd received earlier that day. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Marcus stared out of the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The golden hues of twilight painted the sky, but his thoughts were far from serene. His mind replayed the events at the Grand Vista, the dismissive glances, the whispered comments, the thinly veiled disdain. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered racism, but something about this incident struck a nerve. Perhaps it was the audacity of their prejudice, hidden behind a facade of professionalism, or perhaps it was the realization that even with all his success, there were still places where people saw him as less than human. But anger wasn't Marcus's default reaction. He had learned long ago that emotions like rage could cloud judgment and lead to reckless decisions. Instead, he channeled his frustration into focus. Sitting back in his seat, he opened his laptop and began researching the Grand Vista. He wanted to know everything about the hotel, its history, its owners, its financial standing. If they thought they could turn him away without consequence, they were sorely mistaken. Marcus didn't believe in revenge, he believed in justice. And if justice meant exposing their hypocrisy and forcing them to confront their own biases, then so be it. As the hours passed, Marcus uncovered some surprising details. The Grand Vista wasn't the thriving business it pretended to be. Behind its polished exterior lay a crumbling foundation. The hotel had been struggling financially for years, burdened by mounting debts and declining occupancy rates. Tourism in the coastal town had dwindled due to rising competition from larger resorts nearby. Maintenance costs were spiraling out of control, and customer reviews highlighted complaints about poor service and outdated amenities. Despite its luxurious appearance, the Grand Vista was on the brink of collapse. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This wasn't just an opportunity to teach the hotel owners a lesson. It was a chance to transform the establishment entirely. But how? Buying the hotel outright seemed too straightforward, almost predictable. Yet the more Marcus thought about it, the more sense it made. By acquiring the Grand Vista, he could ensure that no one else would ever experience the humiliation he had endured. More importantly, he could turn it into a symbol of inclusivity and progress. A place where everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background, would feel welcome. The next morning, Marcus assembled his trusted team via video conference. They were a diverse group of experts, lawyers, accountants, public relations specialists, and hospitality consultants who had worked with him for years. Each member brought unique skills to the table, and together, they formed a formidable force. When Marcus explained his plan, the room erupted in murmurs of approval. "Are you sure about this?" asked Sarah, his longtime legal advisor. Buying the hotel is one thing, but taking over management might require significant effort. I'm aware of the challenges, Marcus replied calmly. But I didn't build my empire by avoiding hard work. Besides, this isn't just about me. It's about setting an example, for them and for anyone who thinks discrimination is acceptable. With unanimous support from his team, Marcus set the wheels in motion. First, they drafted a detailed proposal outlining the terms of acquisition. Rather than revealing his identity immediately, Marcus decided to operate through a shell company, ensuring that the hotel's owners wouldn't suspect who was behind the deal. The offer was generous yet strategic, enough to entice the desperate owners while leaving room for future investments. When the proposal landed on the desk of the Grand Vista's current owner, Richard Caldwell, it couldn't have come at a better time. Richard was a middle-aged man whose family had owned the hotel for generations. Once a source of pride, the property had become a millstone around his neck. Bank loans, overdue payments, and dwindling profits had left him sleepless and stressed. When his lawyer informed him of the buyout offer, Richard nearly wept with relief. Without hesitation, he accepted the terms, eager to wash his hands of the failing business. What Richard didn't realize was that Marcus had already begun laying the groundwork for change. Even before finalizing the purchase, Marcus dispatched a team of architects and designers to assess the hotel's condition. Their mission was simple: modernize the facilities while preserving the charm that made the Grand Vista unique. New furniture, updated technology, and eco-friendly upgrades were just the beginning. Marcus also instructed his hospitality consultants to revamp the staff training program, emphasizing diversity, inclusion, and exceptional customer service. Every employee, from housekeeping to management, would undergo rigorous workshops designed to eliminate bias and foster respect. Meanwhile, Marcus kept a low profile, allowing Richard and his team to continue running the hotel until the transition was complete. He knew that surprise was key. If word got out that a black billionaire now owned the Grand Vista, it might undermine his plans. For weeks, Marcus monitored the progress remotely, receiving daily updates from his team. Slowly but surely, the once dilapidated hotel began to transform into something extraordinary. One evening, as Marcus reviewed the latest reports, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about creating lasting change. Racism wasn't something that could be eradicated overnight, but every step forward mattered. By turning the Grand Vista into a model of excellence, Marcus hoped to inspire others to follow suit. He envisioned a world where businesses prioritized humanity over profit, where kindness triumphed over cruelty, and where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. Yet, Marcus knew the hardest part was yet to come. Owning the hotel was only half the battle. Making its former owners and the world understand why he'd done it was another challenge altogether. How would Richard react when he discovered the truth? Would the staff resent him for upending their routines? And what about the guests? Could he win them over? Not just with luxury, but with principles? Despite these uncertainties, Marcus felt a deep sense of purpose. He had faced adversity countless times throughout his life, and each obstacle had only strengthened his resolve. This was no different. With determination burning in his chest, Marcus closed his laptop and gazed out the window. The stars twinkled faintly in the night sky, a reminder that even in darkness, light could shine through. Tomorrow, he would return to the Grand Vista, not as a rejected guest but as its rightful owner. And when he did, the world would never look at the hotel, or him, the same way again. The day Marcus Reed officially became the owner of the Grand Vista marked a turning point, not just for the hotel but for everyone involved. Yet no one except Marcus and his inner circle knew about the monumental shift. To the staff, to the guests, and even to Richard Caldwell, the previous owner, everything seemed business as usual. The transition had been seamless, almost invisible. Marcus had instructed his team to keep his involvement under wraps until the time was right. For now, he wanted the world to believe that the Grand Vista was still operating under its old management. Behind The scenes, however, a whirlwind of activity was taking place. Marcus's vision for the hotel was ambitious, and he wasted no time bringing it to life. Teams of workers arrived early in the mornings, quietly renovating rooms, updating hallways, and installing state-of-the-art technology throughout the property. The once dingy carpets were replaced with elegant hardwood floors. Outdated light fixtures gave way to sleek, modern designs. Every detail was carefully considered, from the color palette of the walls to the scent of the candles burning in the lobby. Marcus wanted the grand vista to feel like a sanctuary, a place where people could escape the chaos of the outside world and experience pure comfort. But the changes weren't limited to aesthetics. Marcus understood that true transformation went beyond appearances. It required addressing the root causes of the problems that had plagued the hotel, and that meant focusing on the staff. Many of the employees had grown complacent over the years, accustomed to cutting corners and treating guests with indifference. Some harbored prejudices they didn't even realize they had, while others simply lacked the training needed to provide exceptional service. Marcus knew that fixing these issues wouldn't happen overnight, but he was determined to try. He hired a renowned hospitality consultant named Elena Martinez to oversee the staff training program. Elena was known for her ability to turn struggling hotels into five-star establishments, and she approached the task with both passion and precision. Over the course of several weeks, she conducted workshops designed to challenge the employees' assumptions and broaden their perspectives. Role-playing exercises helped them practice handling difficult situations with empathy and professionalism. Discussions about diversity and inclusion encouraged them to reflect on their own biases and consider how those biases might affect their interactions with guests. At first, some of the staff resisted the changes. A few grumbled about the extra work, while others dismissed the training as unnecessary. One veteran employee, a man named Greg, who had worked at the Grand Vista for over 2 decades, openly mocked the idea of sensitivity lessons. "We're here to clean rooms and serve food," he muttered during one session. "Not hold hands and sing Kumbaya." Elena didn't react with anger or frustration. Instead, she smiled warmly and said, "Greg, imagine you walk into a restaurant and the server treats you poorly because of how you look. How would that make you feel? Would you come back?" Greg hesitated, then mumbled, "I guess not." "Exactly," Elena replied. "Every guest deserves to be treated with respect. It's not just good ethics, it's good business. And trust me, when you see the results, you'll understand why we're doing this." Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. The staff started to take pride in their work, realizing that their efforts directly impacted the hotel's success. They learned to greet guests with genuine smiles, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, and to handle complaints with grace and understanding. By the time the renovations were complete, the Grand Vista felt like an entirely different place, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Meanwhile, Marcus remained behind the scenes, observing the progress with quiet satisfaction. He visited the hotel frequently, always dressed in plain clothes and avoiding drawing attention to himself. On one occasion, he struck up a conversation with a young housekeeper named Maria, who had recently joined the staff. She spoke enthusiastically about the new training program, saying, "It's made such a difference. I used to dread coming to work, but now I actually enjoy it. People are nicer here, both the guests and my co-workers." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, pleased to hear that his efforts were paying off. "That's what I hoped for," he said. "A hotel is only as good as the people who run it. If everyone feels valued, the guests will notice." Maria looked at him curiously. "You seem to know a lot about this stuff. Do you work in hospitality?" Marcus chuckled softly. "Something like that." As the weeks passed, word began to spread about the Grand Vista's remarkable transformation. Travel bloggers praised the hotel's stunning decor and impeccable service. Online reviews highlighted the friendly staff and attention to detail. Even locals who had previously avoided the establishment started recommending it to friends and family. Business was booming, and for the first time in years, the Grand Vista turned a profit. Richard Caldwell, the former owner, couldn't help but marvel at the turnaround. Though he had sold the hotel months earlier, he occasionally visited to check on its progress, or so he claimed. In reality, he was curious about the mysterious buyer who had breathed new life into his failing property. Whenever he asked questions, however, the answers were vague. "The new owner prefers to remain anonymous," the manager told him with a shrug. "All we know is that they're committed to making the Grand Vista the best it can be." Richard found this both intriguing and slightly unsettling. Part of him wondered if he should have tried harder to negotiate better terms for the sale. But another part of him couldn't deny that the hotel was thriving in ways he had never imagined possible. Whatever the new owner was doing, it was working. Unbeknownst to Richard, Marcus was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself. He wanted the unveiling to be unforgettable, an event that would leave a lasting impression not just on the staff and guests, but on the entire community. Plans were already underway for a grand gala to celebrate the hotel's reopening under new management. Invitations had been sent to local dignitaries, media outlets, and influential figures from across the region. Prominent speakers were lined up to discuss topics ranging from racial equality to economic empowerment. And at the center of it all would be Marcus, ready to share his story and explain why he had taken such drastic measures to reclaim the Grand Vista. In the days leading up to the gala, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Staff members buzzed with excitement, eager to show off the fruits of their labor. Guests checked in with wide eyes, marveling at the hotel's newfound elegance. Even the townspeople, who had long regarded the Grand Vista as a relic of the past, expressed curiosity about its sudden resurgence. Everyone wanted to know who was behind this miraculous revival. Marcus watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and resolve. He knew that the gala would be more than just a celebration. It would be a reckoning. When he stepped onto the stage that evening, he wouldn't just be introducing himself as the new owner of the Grand Vista. He would be confronting the very system that had rejected him, proving that resilience and integrity could triumph over prejudice and fear. As the sun set on the eve of the gala, Marcus stood on the balcony of his suite, overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, their rhythm steady and unwavering. It reminded him of his own journey, the highs and lows, the challenges and victories. Tomorrow, he would face the world head-on, armed with nothing but the truth. And when he did, he knew that the Grand Vista would stand as a testament to the power of change, for better or for worse. The night of the gala arrived, and the Grand Vista was transformed into a scene straight out of a fairy tale. Twinkling string lights adorned the lobby, casting a warm glow over the marble floors. Fresh flowers filled every corner, their sweet fragrance mingling with the soft strains of live jazz music drifting through the air. Guests dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits milled about, sipping champagne and marveling at the hotel's stunning makeover. It was impossible not to feel a sense of awe. Even those who had visited before barely recognized the place. Among the attendees was Richard Caldwell, the former owner, who had been invited as a gesture of goodwill. Or so he thought. He wandered through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, but his curiosity was palpable. Who was this mysterious benefactor who had turned the Grand Vista into such a success? Rumors swirled among the guests, ranging from wild speculations about reclusive millionaires to whispers of celebrity investors. No one seemed to have any concrete answers, which only added to the intrigue. As the clock struck 8, the master of ceremonies took the stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and confident, "thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the grand reopening of the Grand Vista. This hotel has undergone an incredible transformation, and we owe it all to one person, a visionary leader whose dedication and commitment have made this possible." A hush fell over the room as the spotlight shifted toward the entrance. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the faint rustle of fabric as heads turned in anticipation. Then Marcus Reed stepped into view, Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy blue suit, his presence commanded immediate respect. There was no fanfare, no dramatic entrance, just the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly why he was there. The audience erupted into applause, though many faces betrayed confusion. To most, Marcus was a stranger. But to the staff members, who had worked at the hotel during its darker days, recognition dawned almost instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Isn't that? Wait, is that him?" Marcus walked calmly to the stage, his expression calm but resolute. As he reached the podium, he paused for a moment, surveying the sea of faces before him. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few, even fewer than he expected, seemed uneasy. He could see Richard Caldwell near the front, his brow furrowed in bewilderment. Marcus allowed himself a small knowing smile before beginning to speak. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you for being here tonight. I know many of you are wondering who I am and what brought me to the Grand Vista. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Marcus Reed, and I am the new owner of this hotel." A murmur swept through the crowd, growing louder as people processed his words. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle of Marcus standing tall and composed under the spotlight. He waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. "When I first came to the Grand Vista several months ago, I didn't arrive as an investor or a businessman. I came as a guest, a traveler looking for a place to rest after a long journey. I was tired, hungry, and ready to enjoy the comforts this beautiful establishment promised. Instead, I was met with something far less welcoming." Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. The room grew quieter, the weight of his statement hanging heavy in the air. He glanced briefly at the receptionist who had turned him away, her face pale and frozen in shock. She hadn't recognized him earlier when she checked him in for the gala, assuming he was just another wealthy attendee. Now, reality hit her like a freight train. "I won't go into too much detail," Marcus continued, his tone measured but firm. "But suffice it to say, I was denied service, not because the hotel was full, but because of the color of my skin. At the time, I chose not to make a scene. I left quietly, determined to prove that discrimination has consequences, not just for those who practice it, but for the institutions that allow it to thrive." He paused again, scanning the audience. Some people nodded in understanding, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Richard Caldwell stared at Marcus, his mouth slightly agape, as if trying to piece together how this man had slipped past him unnoticed. "After that day, I decided to take action. I purchased the Grand Vista, not out of spite, but out of a desire to create something better, something meaningful. Over the past few months, we've worked tirelessly to transform this hotel into a beacon of excellence and inclusivity. We've renovated the facilities, trained the staff, and realigned our values to reflect what true hospitality should be: kindness, respect, and equality for all." Applause broke out once more, louder and more heartfelt this time. Many in the audience clapped enthusiastically, moved by Marcus's story and vision. Others exchanged glances, clearly grappling with the implications of his revelation. Among them were the employees who had once treated him poorly, now visibly shaken by guilt and regret. "But tonight isn't just about me," Marcus added, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. "It's about all of us. Racism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's perpetuated by systems, attitudes, and actions. And while I can't change the world overnight, I can change this one corner of it. That's why I'm announcing the creation of the Reed Foundation for Equity and Hospitality. Through this initiative, we'll provide scholarships, mentorships, and resources to minority individuals pursuing careers in the hospitality industry, because representation matters, and everyone deserves a fair chance to succeed." The announcement drew cheers and whistles, with some guests rising to their feet in admiration. Marcus concluded his speech by thanking the staff for their hard work and urging the community to support the hotel's mission moving forward. When he stepped down from the stage, the applause was thunderous, echoing off the walls of the grand ballroom. As the festivities resumed, conversations buzzed throughout the venue. Reporters scrambled to interview Marcus, eager to capture his story for their publications. Social media lit up with photos and videos of the event, spreading the news faster than anyone could have anticipated. By midnight, hashtags like Grand Vista owner and equity in hospitality were trending nationwide. For Marcus, the evening was both exhilarating and exhausting. He spent hours mingling with guests, answering questions, and sharing his vision for the future. Yet, amidst the chaos, he couldn't help but notice the reactions of those closest to the situation. The receptionist who had turned him away approached him timidly, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't realize. I never meant—" Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes," he said softly. "What matters is learning from them and doing better. You have a chance to grow, to be part of something extraordinary. Don't waste it." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and walked away with a renewed sense of purpose. Nearby, Richard Caldwell stood awkwardly, unsure whether to approach Marcus or slip away unnoticed. Eventually, he mustered the courage to extend his hand. "Mr. Reed," he began hesitantly. "I had no idea. If I'd known—" Marcus shook his hand firmly. "You do now," he replied simply. "And that's what counts." By the end of the night, the Grand Vista wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a symbol of redemption, resilience, and hope. Marcus Reed had turned adversity into opportunity, proving that even in the face of prejudice, grace and determination could pave the way for lasting change. The days following the gala were nothing short of a whirlwind. Marcus Reed had expected his story to generate some attention, but he hadn't anticipated just how far it would spread or how deeply it would resonate with people. News outlets across the country and eventually around the world picked up the tale of the black billionaire who turned rejection into redemption. Headlines blared phrases like, "From rejected guest to owner," and "A lesson in accountability." Talk show hosts invited Marcus onto their programs, eager to hear him recount the events in his own words. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about racism, privilege, and corporate responsibility, using the Grand Vista as a case study for meaningful change. For many, Marcus's actions struck a chord because they represented more than just personal triumph. They highlighted systemic issues that needed addressing. Countless individuals shared their own stories of discrimination, flooding comment sections and forums with heartfelt messages. Some recounted being denied service at restaurants or hotels, while others spoke of microaggressions in workplaces or schools. What made Marcus's story unique was its resolution. Rather than retaliating with anger or bitterness, he chose to confront prejudice head-on, transforming a symbol of exclusion into one of inclusivity. Back at the Grand Vista, life took on a new rhythm. The staff, inspired by Marcus's vision, threw themselves into their work with renewed energy. They greeted guests with genuine warmth, went above and beyond to meet requests, and fostered an atmosphere of mutual respect. Employees who had initially resisted the changes now embraced them wholeheartedly, realizing that treating others kindly wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. Even Greg, the skeptical veteran employee, admitted during a team meeting that he'd underestimated the impact of empathy. "I thought this whole sensitivity thing was nonsense," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "But seeing how happy our guests are, I get it now." Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon the Grand Vista became known not only for its luxurious accommodations, but also for its exceptional service. Travelers flocked to the hotel, curious to experience firsthand the place where such a remarkable transformation had occurred. Bloggers raved about the staff's attentiveness, photographers captured the stunning renovations, and critics praised the establishment's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Business boomed, and for the first time in years, the hotel's financial future looked secure. Meanwhile, the former owners and staff members who had played a role in turning Marcus away faced public scrutiny. Richard Caldwell issued a formal apology through a press release, acknowledging his failure to address discriminatory practices during his tenure. "I am deeply sorry for the harm caused," he wrote. While I cannot undo the past, I vow to learn from my mistakes and support efforts to promote equality and hospitality. His statement was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded his willingness to take accountability, while others dismissed it as too little, too late. The receptionist who had rejected Marcus also came forward, speaking candidly in interviews about her regret. She explained that she had been following implicit instructions from higher-ups to prioritize certain types of guests over others, a practice she now recognized as wrong. I let fear guide my actions, she confessed, but Mr. Reed showed me that kindness is always the right choice. Her honesty earned her both sympathy and criticism, but ultimately, Marcus encouraged her to stay on as part of the team, believing everyone deserved a second chance. As the dust settled, Marcus focused on expanding the reach of the Reed Foundation for Equity and Hospitality. He partnered with universities, trade schools, and community organizations to create scholarships and internship programs aimed at empowering underrepresented groups in the industry. Workshops were held to educate employers about unconscious bias, and mentorship initiatives connected seasoned professionals with aspiring workers. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting donations from corporations and philanthropists eager to align themselves with its mission. One particularly memorable moment came when Marcus visited a local high school to speak with students about pursuing careers in hospitality. Standing before a packed auditorium, he shared his journey, from growing up in modest circumstances to building a global empire. Success isn't about money, he told the wide-eyed teenagers. It's about making a difference. If you see something unfair, don't ignore it. Use your voice, your skills, your opportunities to create change. That's how we build a better world. His words resonated deeply, especially among minority students who rarely saw representation in leadership roles. Afterward, dozens lined up to thank him, their faces glowing with inspiration. One young woman named Jasmine approached him shyly, clutching a notebook filled with sketches of hotel designs. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "your story gives me hope. I want to design spaces where everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are." Marcus smiled warmly, patting her shoulder. "Then do it," he replied. "Dream big, work hard, and never let anyone tell you you're not enough. You have the power to shape the future." By the end of the year, the Grand Vista stood as a shining example of what could be achieved when values aligned with action. It wasn't perfect, there were still challenges to overcome, but it was undeniably better. Guests left with smiles, employees felt valued, and the community thrived thanks to increased tourism and economic activity. More importantly, the hotel served as a reminder that progress was possible, even in places tainted by prejudice. Marcus himself remained humbled despite the accolades. He declined offers to write a memoir or star in a documentary, preferring instead to focus on tangible ways to drive change. When asked during an interview how he wanted to be remembered, he simply said, "As someone who tried to make things better, that's all any of us can hope for." And perhaps that was the true legacy of Marcus Reed, not the wealth he amassed or the businesses he built, but the lives he touched and the lessons he taught. Through his actions, he proved that adversity could be transformed into opportunity, that forgiveness was stronger than resentment, and that kindness, above all else, had the power to heal wounds and bridge divides. The Grand Vista wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a testament to the belief that even the hardest hearts could change and even the darkest moments could lead to light. Years passed, and the Grand Vista continued to thrive under Marcus Reed's leadership. What had once been a struggling hotel on the verge of collapse was now a shining beacon of excellence, celebrated not only for its luxurious accommodations, but also for its unwavering commitment to inclusivity and equality. Guests from all walks of life flocked to the property, drawn by its reputation as a place where everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background, was treated with dignity and respect. It wasn't just a hotel. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and progress. Marcus, however, didn't rest on his laurels. Though he had achieved what many would consider an extraordinary victory, he knew that true change required constant effort. Racism and discrimination weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They were deeply ingrained in society, perpetuated by systems and attitudes that took generations to build. But Marcus believed that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. And so he dedicated himself to expanding the impact of the Reed Foundation for Equity and Hospitality, ensuring that its mission reached far beyond the walls of the Grand Vista. The foundation flourished, becoming a global force for good in the hospitality industry. Scholarships funded the education of countless students who might otherwise have been unable to pursue their dreams. Internship programs provided hands-on experience to young professionals eager to make their mark. Workshops and seminars educated employers about the importance of diversity and inclusion, helping them create workplaces where everyone felt valued. Through partnerships with major hotel chains, airlines, and tourism boards, the foundation sparked conversations about systemic bias and inspired meaningful reforms. One of the most impactful initiatives Marcus launched was the Hospitality Heroes campaign, which highlighted stories of individuals making a difference in their communities. From a single mother running a bed and breakfast in rural India to a former refugee turned executive chef in Paris, these profiles celebrated the power of perseverance and compassion. Each story served as a reminder that hospitality wasn't just about providing service. It was about creating connections, fostering understanding, and building bridges between people. Marcus's influence extended beyond the hospitality world. His actions at the Grand Vista ignited broader discussions about racial justice and economic equity, inspiring others to take similar stands against discrimination. Entrepreneurs began examining their own businesses, asking tough questions about representation and fairness. Corporations reevaluated their hiring practices, striving to create more diverse workforces. Even local governments took notice, implementing policies aimed at addressing inequality in public spaces. Marcus's quiet yet powerful example demonstrated that accountability wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. Despite his growing fame, Marcus remained grounded. He still preferred simple pleasures over extravagant displays of wealth, often spending weekends hiking in the mountains near his home or volunteering at community centers. He mentored young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons he'd learned throughout his journey. Success isn't measured by how much money you make, he often told them. It's measured by how many lives you touch. Among those whose lives Marcus touched was Jasmine, the high school student who had approached him years earlier with her sketches of hotel designs. With the help of a scholarship from the Reed Foundation, she attended a prestigious design school and graduated at the top of her class. Her first major project? Redesigning a wing of the Grand Vista, incorporating elements that reflected the cultural heritage of the coastal town. When the renovation was unveiled, Marcus stood beside her during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, beaming with pride. "This is your legacy," he said, gesturing toward the beautifully transformed space. "Not mine." As time went on, the Grand Vista became more than just a hotel. It became a hub for activism and innovation. Annual conferences brought together leaders from various industries to discuss ways to combat prejudice and promote equality. Art exhibits showcased works by underrepresented creators, amplifying voices that had long been silenced. Community events welcomed locals and tourists alike, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. The hotel was no longer merely a destination, it was a movement. For Marcus, the greatest reward wasn't the accolades or the financial success. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference. Every guest who checked in smiling, every employee who found fulfillment in their work, every student who pursued their dreams because of the foundation's support, all of it reinforced his belief that kindness and integrity could overcome even the deepest divides. On a quiet evening several years after the gala, Marcus stood on the balcony of his suite, gazing out at the ocean. The waves rolled gently onto the shore, their rhythm steady and eternal. He thought about how far he had come, from the boy who grew up dreaming of a better life to the man who dared to challenge injustice. He thought about the people he had met along the way, the challenges he had faced, and the victories he had achieved. Most of all, he thought about the future, the countless possibilities waiting to unfold. Marcus smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had done what he set out to do, turn adversity into opportunity, hatred into understanding, and exclusion into inclusion. But he also knew that the work was never truly finished. There would always be more hearts to change, more minds to open, more barriers to break. And though he couldn't solve every problem or right every wrong, he could continue to lead by example, showing the world that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Marcus whispered a silent promise to himself and to the future. "We've come a long way," he said, "but we're not done yet." Then, with a final glance at the breathtaking view, he turned and walked back inside, ready to face whatever lay ahead.